Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Well, yesterday, one of the apps on my telephone told me that it was a full moon. And already it began to show a declining percentage as the moon wanes. Now, we use the word wane, the verb to wane, when something begins to lose its popularity or no longer has a function. It wanes slowly as its power disappears. So the full moon begins to wane after it reaches its climax, and then it begins to wane. So the build up to the full moon is called waxing. We don't hear that very often in English, perhaps in 19th century literature. So the build-up is called waxing, but waning we still use a lot in English. Anyway, because it was a full moon, many people were taking pictures and posting them on social media. In our history, our ancestors here in the UK used to give moons different names. So the one for this time of year is called a strawberry moon. Now, I think that's an English thing. I haven't really heard of that anywhere else, and I certainly haven't heard of that around the north of the UK. So anyway, the strawberry moon, probably because of its colour, which is a little bit reddish, it's called the strawberry moon. And since ancient times, full moons have been associated with odd or insane behaviour. This is where the English word lunatic comes from. It's not actually a legal word, but it's often used to describe how somebody is. Lunatic. And indeed, in British English, we used to call people who were crazy loonies. And in American English, they were called loons. These days in English, we don't use these words so much, of course, because mental health problems are much more respected, and these words would have been considered derogatory or bad. So now they're just used to talk about crazy ideas or people who are not considered to be behaving in a way which is acceptable in society. So nothing to do with mental health anymore. These words are simply used to talk about maybe someone who paints strange pictures or someone who has strange interests. The other day, I was telling you in a podcast about anoraks. An anorak is someone who's obsessed with very specific information, and it looks really strange for the rest of us. So, for example, people who collect strange objects, or people who rush to train stations just so they can write down the model number of the train, train spotters. These people would be considered, well, crazy. So some people might call them loonies. They might say, oh, John is a complete loony. He loves trains. So it's no longer used to talk about mental health, but in the past it almost certainly was. People used to say that during a full moon, weird behavior would come up, like illegal activity, fits of violence, and of course there were legends that people transformed into werewolves. We also have the word lunacy. And these things actually come from the Roman goddess of the moon, Luna, who was said to ride her silver chariot across the dark sky each night. For thousands of years, doctors and mental health professionals believed in a strong connection between manic behavior and the moon. Hippocrates, he was, well, in many ways, one of the founding fathers of modern medicine. He said that one who is seized with terror, fright, and madness during the night is being visited by the goddess of the moon. I don't know if he was speaking metaphorically or not, but I do know that in 18th century England, people who were accused of murder, they could actually campaign for release or freedom on the grounds of lunacy if they actually did their crime under the full moon. And also, we had, of course, in those days, many psychiatric hospitals. And it was considered a great shame if you ended up in a psychiatric hospital. They were known as Bedlam hospitals in the old days. Bedlam being some pronunciation of the word Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, Bedlam. So it just became like a nickname. And of course, in English today, if something is a complete mess, we can say, oh, it's complete bedlam, meaning that it was so busy today, oh, it was bedlam. That's another reference to the old days when we considered people who acted in a certain way to be lunatics or mentally ill. Yeah, people in London's Bedlam Hospital were often tied up as a preventative measure during certain phases of the moon. Even today, some people still believe that the full moon has an effect on people, that those people who believe it today tend to be New Age thinkers or people who are pagans, because that theory has been completely discredited by modern medicine. Another English idiom which comes from mental illness is going round the bend. Now, you may have heard this before. When we are in a stressful situation at work or in other places, we often say, oh, I'm going round the bend trying to get this project finished, or I'm going round the bend trying to get SAP to work. Another one might be, oh, my boss's behavior is driving me round the bend. Now, these are all phrases associated with mental illness. Round the bend means making me stressed. But where did that phrase come from? Well, it has a very colourful history. In Victorian times, here in the UK, people who were mentally ill were never spoken about. It was considered a great shame on society. And in some parts of the world, it still is, sadly. But there was a time in our history, a very dark time, when being mentally ill, you couldn't talk about it. It was something dishonorable, something impolite. So they developed a coded language for people to speak about it. Did you hear about John? He went round the bend. That means that he went crazy or he has mental health problems. And why did we say round the bend? Well, it's because in those days, psychiatric hospitals were placed far away from any city or town. They were put in the countryside where people couldn't access them easily, and also to protect people from coming across crazy people. So they built all these psychiatric hospitals. They were usually really dark-looking places, horrible places, but they were never in a town centre. They were always far away, and you had to quite literally walk or drive in a road which was a country road, so it would have lots of bends in the road. So rather than say John's gone to the psychiatric hospital up on the mountain, they would say he's gone round the bend, meaning the bend in the road, that dangerous road that's always hard to walk or to drive, because country roads are often full of bends. Yeah, so we still use that today. Oh, I'm going round the bend here trying to finish this project. But it no longer means I'm going crazy. It just means I'm a little bit stressed. Interesting, isn't it? How we use these things. Very sad, though, huh? Very dark. I know that in tracing my family history, I discovered that one of my relatives, I think my great great aunt, was in a psychiatric hospital here, and I never knew anything about it. It was something never spoken of. And I'm always very suspicious when I discover a relative that I've never heard of or no one's ever spoken about, especially in my generation, because it means that they either did something socially unacceptable or they had behaviors which other people didn't like. It's very interesting, that code that we live by. Anyway, another thing about the moon, some people think that the moon controls fertility. But there's been lots of discussion about that one. In the 1950s, a Czech doctor, Dr. Eugene Jonas, he stumbled across an ancient Assyrian astrological text stating that women were more fertile during certain phases of the moon. I can understand why people would think that. I mean, it does pull the water into the shore at the beach, so I can see why people would think it would affect water in the body, maybe. According to many theories which exist this day, full moons cause a rise in conceptions, apparently flooding maternity wards with mothers who are in labor. That just means going to have their babies. But there's no evidence for this. And most people think that any lunar effect on conceiving children is imagined. Who knows? Who knows? I think it's important to stay open-minded on that. Of course, many people think that we never really went to the moon. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories about that one. You'd have to be a bit of a loony to believe that, I think. Other ones that I've heard of, that there's a rabbit living up there, that the moon is hollow. Those aren't really legends, though. Those are more kind of conspiracies. But in the old days, I guess they were the same things. Well, those are just some unusual myths, and we can't forget the one about the werewolf, of course. The man who becomes a wolf during the full moon. That's another thing. Many movies have been on TV about that. Do you know, I don't really like werewolves very much. If you asked me what's your favorite mythical creature, I quite enjoy vampires. They're quite nice. Yeah, I like vampires. Only the one played by Frank Langella. Oh, he was definitely the best Dracula from 1979. He was Dracula. he was the kind of die-hard romantic, He used to, sit in front of candles and talk about, oh, the little children, they wait for me. Talking about people he's going to kill. Yeah, I liked Frank Langella's Dracula. I wasn't really keen on the modern versions. There's one with that actor with little round glasses. He looks like a kind of 1970s or 80s hippie vampire. I can't remember the actor that portrayed him. Yeah, he wasn't one of my favorites, but clearly a wonderful actor. I think that was Gary Oldman. Yeah, Gary Oldman was the version of Dracula who used to wear little round glasses, like looking like John Lennon. Funniest thing. But Frank Langella, that was the real die-hard Gothic, and of course, he was looking very Italian as well. You know, using the archetype of seduction. Very nice, very nice. Anyway, we've kind of wandered into talking about vampires, which leads me on to something else. Yeah, headline of the newspapers today, uh, pictures of Christine McGuinness. I don't really know why she's famous. She has apparently she's had a new makeover, a new look, and in my opinion, I just think she looks awful. I mean, I don't think she was the kind of girl you would take home to meet your mother anyway, because she just looks nasty. You know, there's nothing about her that's attractive. And the problem is, you're not allowed to say anything about anybody anymore in public culture. You can't criticize anyone because everyone's entitled to their look. And the argument is, in the case of Christine McGuinness, if you look at her Wikipedia page, she was raised uh, by her family in a very hard environment. It lists exactly what was wrong with them, drugs and alcohol and everything else. And so, therefore, if you try to say that Christine McGuinness looks horrible, people will immediately rebuff you by saying, well, she has a right to look in whatever way she wants. She's obviously had a very hard life. But surely the voice of reason has to tell us that some people, you know, when they try to create new images for themselves, somebody has to be honest and say, oh, that just looks awful. I mean, she just looks nasty, like a bully, you know? That's just my opinion. I'm sure many people will disagree with that, but it's very hard to criticize or comment on these things because whatever way you want to look now is to be celebrated because it's purely an individual choice. So whether everybody hates it or loves it, it's your choice, the way that you want to look or act or who you sleep with or whatever. But in this case, here we have someone that just looks like a bully. And I don't know why someone like that would be famous. Just my opinion. Just my opinion. So she's all over the news today. And I don't really understand why, especially at a time when we have wars, people dying, and other scandals. Well, still, maybe it's better than Philip Schofield, although he's still all over the news today, and so is this program that he was in, because they're making new presenters. But yeah, that's it from me. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and let's talk again soon. See you. Bye.